Hey everybody, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth.
On Now You Know. We're brought to you by abetterrouteplanner.com. Use the link in the show notes below to get a 30-day free trial to the premium app.
And we're sponsored by BigBattery.com with the best battery prices in the USA guaranteed. If you've got something you need to power, from homes to cars, RVs to boats, and much more, BigBattery.com has you covered, offering the newest battery tech. Use the code NOWYOUKNOW to save 5% off your purchases today at BigBattery.com.
And Now You Know is supported by ecoware.us. If you want to find the shirts that Zach and I are wearing, along with dozens and dozens of other designs, you can head over to ecoware.us. And we carbon offset the production, the shipping, and the life cycle of every product. And we plant a tree for every order. And we help cap a well for every order. This week, we're talking about the world's electrical grids and what powers them.
Now, for the longest time, and I'm talking decades here, when I talked with very smart people about how I believed wind and solar could power the electrical grids on this planet, I was met with all kinds of excuses why that would never happen.
Do you know how many solar panels you'd have to make?
Where would you put them all?
What happens at night or when it isn't sunny?
What happens when the wind doesn't blow?
It just won't work. The grid can't handle intermittent loads.
And for decades, I thought, well, maybe they're right, because nobody seems to be building a lot of solar and wind farms.
It really was that intermittent part of the equation that held back solar and wind, because that point was a good one. What do you do when the sun isn't out or it isn't windy? And also the costs were a lot higher back then.
Without a way to store energy on a massive scale, solar and wind power couldn't be more than a small piece of the grid puzzle.
But then one day, Elon Musk said, hey, we've got these lithium-ion batteries that we use in our electric cars. We could also bundle them together into packs for people to use in their homes. And huge packs that could be used on the grid.
And many people scoffed, as they usually do when a new idea comes along, and they said, that'll never work. But then Tesla built the Hornsdale battery in South Australia within 100 days, and it worked perfectly. And all the naysayers were forced to shut the f*** up.
I literally think that this was the tipping point, because you couldn't argue with success. The Hornsdale battery worked on every metric: speed to install, cost of the project, safety. It paid for itself within the first couple of years.
And I don't want to make it seem like Elon was the only person who understood that batteries were the answer to grid-scale storage. There were a lot of smart people working on grid battery solutions. It's just that I believe the world wasn't ready for them until after Tesla Hornsdale.
One of those people was Donald Sadoway, a professor at MIT who over 10 years ago was working on a different kind of battery to do the same thing as Tesla's battery: store a lot of power cheaply and safely. Professor Sadoway didn't want to use lithium-ion batteries. He founded a company called Ambri to make batteries that were dirt cheap.
I like to say, if you want to make something dirt cheap, make it out of dirt, and preferably dirt that's locally sourced. So if I take a shovel full of dirt out of my own backyard and put it on the lab bench and tell my students, you got to make a battery out of what's in that pile of dirt, I know that when we make a battery, it's going to be dirt cheap, and I got a secure supply chain. So we thought about that from the beginning. And if you take a look at the kinds of metals that we're working with, the stuff that Ambri's pursuing right now involves calcium and antimony. And the salt is calcium chloride, which is road salt. That's what we're throwing on the road today, because I can see it snowing right now. And we'll be using calcium chloride on the sidewalks and on the roadways. So we've given considerable thought to making sure that the constituents, the components, are earth abundant, ethically sourced, and with a secure supply chain.
Ambri's liquid metal battery is being used as we speak at TerraCycle's data center near Reno, Nevada. It works differently than a lithium-ion battery.
The way the liquid metal battery works is, first of all, you got to imagine what it looks like inside. There's 3 layers. There's a top layer, which is low-density liquid metal, and that's going to be the negative electrode. And then underneath that is a molten salt, which is the electrolyte. And then beneath that is the high-density liquid metal, which is the positive electrode. So you got 2 electrodes separated by an electrolyte. That's the workings of every battery. And in this instance, the metals are insoluble in the salt, and the salt is insoluble in the metals. So these 3 layers, even though they're all liquid, they don't mix. They stratify, sort of like salad oil and vinegar, only in this case you have 3 layers, not 2. The energy is stored in these liquid metal electrodes. So when you go to discharge, to discharge the battery, you want to draw current. You connect the electrodes across some load, some appliance, what have you. And the way the current is generated, the metal of the top electrode wants to alloy with the metal in the bottom electrode. But I just told you they're not soluble. So the only way the metal from the top electrode can get to the bottom electrode is for the metal of the top electrode to become an ion. So it becomes an ion, and then the ion goes across the electrolyte and meets the positive electrode, where the electrons that have been generated have gone through the external circuit, and then they combine with the ion to make it into a neutral metal. And now the top layer is getting thinner, the bottom layer is getting thicker, and that's how we generate the current.
One of the big benefits of Ambry's battery is that it works for a long time.
There's a push and a pull here. So the pull is that these batteries operating at elevated temperature can cycle with very, very high charging and discharging rates. And they can also cycle deep discharge many times, thousands of cycles, and without capacity fade. In other words, after we have data from Ambry, after 5,000 cycles, the batteries are still retaining 99+% of their original charge. So these are powerful advantages, because if you put batteries on the grid, you're not going to change them every 2-3 years the way you do with your phone or your laptop computer. You want to put them there for 20 years. And that means you have to have batteries that don't lose their capacity. So these are some of the advantages that you get from the liquid metal battery. And also the price point is very, very low. But the other thing is the disadvantages of lithium-ion. Lithium-ion works beautifully in the small format. But if you start putting hundreds of thousands of lithium-ion batteries in close proximity, you're going to have to be very aggressive about thermal management, because they're going to heat up. And if they heat up, they could go supercritical and burst into flame and so on. There's an optimum application for these various battery chemistries. And I think that when you go to grid level storage, lithium-ion might not be the best fit. I mean, we see some evidence of lithium-ion being deployed, but I think in terms of round-trip efficiency and safety and long service lifetime, I think liquid metal battery is a better fit.
Now, Ambry's battery uses a liquid metal chemical process, and therefore it uses metals. But what if I told you that other smart people were developing batteries that store power using this?
What's this?
Air. I'm talking about making a battery that uses something that's even cheaper than dirt: air.
Oh, wait, you're talking about the liquid air battery, where you compress air to store the energy.
Exactly. This is Javier Cavada, CEO and president of Highview Power. You can store power by compressing air.
Exactly. I mean, the only inputs here is electricity and air. So, which, I mean, air, as we all know, is available anywhere that there are human beings. And electricity can be from the grid, can be from a solar farm, can be from wind farm, or can be from a mix. So cooling down the air, and as I said, it's a extremely standard process. You are just reducing the temperature, and then you go from gas to the point of liquefaction. But in the meantime, there are some components of the air that we are breathing that don't get into liquid, but get into solid, like CO2, if there is some pollution in the air, or the water. So we are extracting water. So the air, we are drying it out, and we are taking the CO2 out. So you can really capture the carbon that you have in the air in a place, just to say a place like LA, that I was just before the lockdown, and it was a bit dusty atmosphere, smoggy, yeah, it's a better word. It was a bit smoggy. You would just deliver electricity and air, but the air you deliver back to the atmosphere is cleaner.
So you can compress air into a liquid to store the energy, and then when you let it expand, you take the high-pressure gas that powers a turbine to make electricity again.
Yep. And as Javier explained, in the process, you also take CO2 out of the air, so it could even be carbon negative.
And because you're using air to fill the tanks, you can site these batteries anywhere in the world.
And just like with Ambry's battery, a compressed air battery doesn't degrade as you charge and discharge it.
And another huge advantage of compressed air batteries is that they get cheaper as they get bigger.
If a lithium-ion is able to make 1 hour, you want 2 hours, you need to double the cost. If you want to make 20 hours, you need to multiply by 10 the cost. I mean, in our case, adding hours is marginal.
Right, because big steel tanks are way cheaper to build than lithium-ion batteries. Okay, so here's the thing. We've just talked about 3 battery technologies that are all being used as we speak to store energy at grid scale. They are all in their infancy, and yet they all appear to be very cheap. So even if you don't believe one of them will work for whatever reason, maybe you think we'll run out of air, or maybe the sound of molten metal scares you, it's hard to argue that none of them will work, especially since they're all working right now. What we are talking about is none other than a technological disruption, a technology that did not exist a few years ago. Grid-scale batteries is now becoming commonplace.
Well, great. I'm excited. But what does this have to do with the title of the episode? Stranded, all those power plants stranded on a desert island?
Well, here's where I want to bring in someone we admire a lot on this channel. Author, educator, and co-founder of Rethink X, Tony Seba. In one of Tony's latest videos, he makes a very good case for the fact that many energy analysts and financial experts are still valuing traditional fuel power plants, I mean coal power, natural gas power, and even nuclear-powered plants, with way more value than they should be getting. You see, when you consider building or buying something for a business, you do a calculation. You consider the cost of the purchase balanced against what value it will bring to your business over a certain amount of time. So, for instance, if you're the CEO of a power utility company and you're considering buying a new coal-powered power plant, what would you do? How would you know if this new coal power plant would pay for itself?
I mean, I would take its price to build, and then I would also need to know how much it costs to maintain, plus the cost of, say, the coal every year. And then I'd need to know its expected lifespan. And then I need to know pretty much how much power it can produce. And then I could probably figure out the cost of its electricity.
Good. That's exactly what energy analysts and industry experts do. They calculate the levelized cost of electricity, or LCOE. Now, to simplify, the calculation is the total cost of the plant, so the construction, the maintenance, and the coal, etc., over how much electricity it produces in its expected lifespan.
Well, that looks pretty simple. You said that the analysts and experts are getting this wrong. I mean, how did they get this wrong? Did they forget how to do long division? They must have been doing this calculation for years.
Exactly.
What do you mean exactly?
They've been doing this calculation for years. That's why they're getting it wrong now.
But if they've been doing these calculations for years, they must be really good at doing these calculations. Why are they getting it wrong? Math hasn't changed.
Well, because something has changed.
Oh, I see. They were doing the calculations for years when there was pretty much only one way to make electricity. But now there are new, cheaper ways to make electricity, which is solar, wind, and batteries.
Exactly. And that is throwing off a key part of their calculations. See the bottom part of the equation there? The part that estimates how much power the plant will be making for how long? Well, it used to be that all you had to worry about was things like, downtime for maintenance, stuff like that. Otherwise, the plant would be up and running at close to full capacity for its entire lifetime.
But if along comes wind and solar farms producing power much cheaper, so a lot of the time people will now be buying power from renewables, the coal plant will be offline. So that formula has a smaller number on the bottom.
And we all remember our grade school math, right? Fractions, everybody, take out your math books and turn to chapter 13.
As the amount of electricity that our new coal plant produces goes down because there's less demand, the cost per kilowatt hour of the electricity goes up.
And as it goes up,
less and less people want to pay for it because it's more expensive than the electricity coming from solar and wind farms.
Bingo. We have a stranded asset. And that's why we're seeing more and more fossil fuel plants being shut down prematurely.
But I don't get who's making these wrong calculations.
Well, the IEA, for one.
The International Energy Agency? I mean, yeah, their predictions are always wrong, but I mean, who cares?
Well, hang on. Take a look at this chart from the IEA.
Okay. I don't even really know what I'm looking at here.
Okay, the black points on the graph are now historical data of how much coal energy was produced each year in the U.S.
Okay.
Now see those gray lines emanating from the data points? Those are IEA's projections each year of what the future of coal would look like.
Wait, so the IEA kept projecting that coal would bounce back?
Coal power has dropped in half over the past decade, but if you had listened to the IEA, you would have gotten it completely wrong.
Okay, so the IEA is wrong. Who cares?
The world economy?
What?
Well, who reads those IEA reports?
I don't know. I mean, we do, but we don't really take it that seriously.
Well, yeah, we do, but who else?
I don't know.
How about bankers, economists, elected officials?
Oh, I see. Everyone in the world who makes big decisions is getting the wrong information.
Exactly. If the people who make billion-dollar decisions about our power grid don't understand what's happening, they're going to be deploying capital into something that is about to implode.
Well, isn't that good? I mean, we don't like fossil fuels, so let's let them implode.
Yeah, but we're talking about governments, countries, your tax dollars. We're talking about people who work for these fossil fuel companies. A lot of people are about to be out of jobs.
And then there are companies and people and jobs that rely on those people, like the truck drivers and the railways who transport those fuels. When they lose their jobs, they may stop going to restaurants and into the stores and stimulating the economy.
Yeah, I mean, the economy is a big spider web of connections. Historically, when decision makers don't understand what's coming and they rely on what they've been doing for decades, they make very costly, very bad decisions that allocate capital very inefficiently.
Because things like power plants are basically paid for by ratepayers, you and me. And just take a look at all of these coal, natural gas, and nuclear plants in the world today.
Right. Just look at all of this electrical grid infrastructure, much of which is about to become outdated, uneconomic, and obsolete. And when hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars get spent wrong, who pays for it?
We do.
The good news is that as we transition to solar and wind with batteries, electricity is going to get cleaner and cheaper for all of us. But we need to educate our elected officials and our economists and our bankers and our fund managers about this new disruption, or they will misallocate capital into investments that used to seem secure, like power plants, instead of investing in new technologies that sound fantastical, like molten metal batteries and air batteries and these.
If you're watching this video, and you must be, then you're in a very small group of people on the planet that get what's going on and what's about to happen.
And historically, when a person knows before anyone else what is about to happen, they can profit from it.
They can choose a better career path.
And better investments.
And that's why we started the Disruptive Investing channel, where you can see interviews with Ambry and Highview Power and many more thought leaders who are disrupting current technology.
And you can join our Now You Know Investor Club, where we have monthly live streams with presidents and CEOs of companies who are bringing these disruptive technologies to life.
You could join our 1,400 Investor Club members who are profiting from these new trends that, quite frankly, very few people understand.
So head on over to patreon.com/nowyouknow and help support our channel.
And help support yourself. I mean, the only thing preventing all of us from hearing about the best technologies is research. And you can either put your trust into CNBC and, all of these analysts who want to tell you a certain thing because they're pretty much ready to go, or somebody is. Why not rely on crowdsourced information with, again, over 1,400 investors who are constantly combing through the internet to try and find some of these new companies? I mean, that's how we've heard of some of these companies.
Exactly. We have some of the best people in the world finding out about these new technologies. And then because of you, because you're subscribed, because our numbers are big enough, when we reach out to those companies, we can get right to their presidents and their CEOs and bring them right to you.
And it's something that's so unique across the entire internet because most people are still not sold on this idea that solar, wind, and batteries are going to be the future of power generation. And this is just one small part of a larger revolution that we're seeing in the world because obviously with the decline of fossil fuels, which is going to happen, most people are still not sold on that. So when you go to most of these investing sites, they're like,
Well, make sure that you diversify your portfolio, get some Exxon in there.
And some hydrogen.
Yeah, because the dividends on Exxon just can't be beat. Forget the fact that the company's going to go out of business in the next few decades. Just focus on that nice, juicy dividend.
Exactly. There's a lot of new up-and-coming technologies, a lot of companies that we haven't heard of, and therefore we think, well, they can't have any value. But think of Tesla just a few years ago. It was this tiny little startup, and now it's a behemoth.
And you might be saying, well, Zach and Jesse, I don't care about profit. But what you're actually doing is you are allocating capital. You are voting with your money where you want to see the future to go. And we firmly believe that Tony Seba is right, that if you're investing money into some of these more traditional technologies where you burn stuff to get power, you're essentially just burning your money away, because these plants are not going to be profitable going forward and haven't been historically in the short term. That is why it is so important to be thinking about stuff like this.
Yeah. So thank you so much for watching. Please support our channel, subscribe, hit the like button, and head on over to Patreon where you can support us even more. Thank you so much, everybody. Now you know.